it over. Bring it over. Maybe. Or it's it's just going to take its time. Like, the LA Valiant trying to pick up their first win. Oh, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode number 71, we'll be discussing the latest in Overwatch League news. We will deep dive into two of last week's matches between the London Spitfire and Shanghai Dragons, as well as the Vancouver Titans and Chengdu Hunters. We'll debate what is fact or fiction, introduce a new segment to the show, and preview basically Stage 1 to Week 5, because there's a lot on the line next week with quite a few playoff spots still up for grabs. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight for our live show on Twitch, and of course to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So as you can tell, we are a man down tonight as the inmates are running the asylum over at Spider's house, but back with me yet again, right in the solar coaster with me, is my soulmate Slambo. Slambo, it's good to have you back, brother.
Oh, what's up, nerd? Yes, making my triumphant return from last week. And I promise you that I missed you both very dearly. And I really miss talking Overwatch, frankly. I feel like we just blinked, and now we sit here going into the final week of Stage 1. I don't know how these things happen, so quickly, because we had such anticipation leading up to the kickoff of the season, and now we're almost a quarter of the way through it. I know we'll pretty much have that landmark later, but it just feels like it's just over the horizon. We've got a ton to talk about tonight, and I'm excited. It was a good week. It wasn't. There was a couple matchups we expected to be huge deals, and they really weren't. And then there was a couple matches no one had circled on the calendar that were barn burners. So it was it was a weird week.
It was a pretty good week for my pick'ems outside of a certain LA Gladiators team that couldn't decide on how good of a team they wanted to be. So it's just one of those things. But it was definitely an interesting week, and I'd say some of the matches definitely spooked me in the sense that we were expecting blowouts, and they were absolutely not the case. But we do have some news. So first, playoffs are right around the corner, and what better time to talk about playoff details than right now, because we do have some more information on what is happening for stage number 1. So we do know that the quarterfinal games are going to be held on March 21st and 22nd. We'll have the semifinal matches being held on March 23rd, of course, with the stage finals being held on that Sunday, March 24th. And unfortunately, I might miss this as I have C2E2 that weekend, and I'm going on Sunday, so I better set the DVR to, record on ABC, or just leave all the TVs on at the house so we can make sure we get the TV rating. But we do know that we have 8 of the 20 Overwatch League teams qualifying for the Stage 1 playoffs, so we will have the Pacific and the Atlantic leaders will be awarded with the top 2 seeds for the bracket. Spoilers, those have already been decided. We have the next 6 teams in the standings qualifying regardless of what division that they are in. Of course, that will be based on record and for, tiebreaker purposes, map differential. And of course, they're always bringing up, every map matters. And that's probably going to come into play here within the next week. Now, in regards to teams that are already in, New York Excelsior were the first team to clinch a playoff spot. And lo and behold, NYXL capped off a perfect stage, going undefeated with a 7-0 record. And we also have a slew of teams that are already out of the playoff contention for Stage 1. And that includes the LA Gladiators, the Hangzhou Spark, Shanghai Dragons, Chengdu Hunters, Florida Mayhem, Washington Justice, and the other LA team, the Win Zeros themselves, the LA Valiant. Now, that's not all. There's still more. So we have a single bracket elimination with the quarterfinal games being a first to 3. Okay, we're going to use the Slambo terminology with this, just like they are.
Keep it
helps.
simple for me, Totem. Yeah. Keep it simple.
And that's exactly what they're doing. So with the semifinals and the final Slambo, it's first to 4. Okay, so we're on the same page.
Okay, so wait, hold on, just so we can be on the same page. 4 is 1 above 3, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm tracking. Okay.
And what's interesting is after the opening round, we're actually at the bracket being reseeded, so that might lead to some more interesting matches going into that round of 4. So basically, how this is going to work is you're going to have the higher seeded teams selecting the first map, with the losing team getting to select the next map. And we got some prize pool money details, but probably the biggest news out of all of this, Slambo, is the fact that, we're kind of on TV. And this is a pretty big deal because we saw, the grand finals on ESPN. And the stage finals, at least for the semifinals and the finals, are going to be on ABC. So that's basically, every TV. I mean, it's basic cable, which is great to see. Everyone has this channel. So you can tune in for the Overwatch League from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time on both of those days. So absolutely massive news. And I have to say, I like the fact that we're seeing a bit more of an expansion, not just for the season playoffs, but also at the stage playoff level. So, I know stage 1 is kind of blown by really quickly, but I want to get your thoughts on the new playoff format for these stages.
So certainly a highlight is obviously, being on TV is great. And it's only really good, though, if people watch it and if people stay and watch it, because even though the rating system is a bit archaic and not exactly the way things are tracked anymore, it certainly is fascinating to me to see what the general public's response will be on a platform like ABC. And, we've seen it on ESPN, but this just seems like we're kind of breaking some new ground here. But it's still great news, and I'll try to convince people from work to at least check it out if they haven't. To answer your question as far as the format goes, I really like 2 major aspects of it. One is the reseeding of teams after the quarterfinals. So after, I believe, the first round, essentially the first 2 days of play, we're going to see a reseeding. And then the team that has the higher seed is now incentivized because they get to pick that first map. And I love the idea of strategies built around map picks based on team strengths and weaknesses. It's something that we saw more in Apex, and I really Apex. Oh my God, Apex, right? Oh my God, why am I've been playing that new game, Totem, full disclosure, and I feel like I'm blanking right now on the name of the old Korean league, and I'm thinking I'm calling it something else. But am I calling it correctly?
You're good.
Okay, dude, that sounded so. You say something and you're like, "That's not right. There's no way that's right." I've been playing so much of that game. I'm like, I'm calling. Okay, so anyway, I it's so funny. The memory's intact, but the name escapes me. But the point still remains, is that there was just a lot more of a fun storytelling element as you went through when teams had highs and lows on different map types or different specific maps. And that's just really a fun element to add to spectatorship. So anyway, I just think that any way you can do that and give teams kind of like an incentive to place higher and do better in that, just to your point, in that map to map moment, it's better for the league and better for the experience.
Absolutely, and we're not going to have to wait very long because the stage playoffs are really right around the corner. We got one more week, which is the travel week, which is important to note. So just as a reminder, for week number 5, we will only have matches on Saturday and Sunday this week. So please keep that in mind. We'll have Thursday, Friday off. So it's not going to interfere with movie plans, anything like that. So I'm excited. We got a lot of matches this week too that have playoff implications as well, because there's really I think 2 teams that are technically out of contention that are traveling this week. So for the most part, every game is going to matter, which is absolutely fantastic. So I cannot wait to see how everything is going to shape up here. And I have to say, like, it's pretty late, and our dynasty team is kind of on the bubble right now. Looking at the overall stand-ins, dynasty are actually sitting at number 10. They are 3-3 with a +2 map differential, and there are currently 5 teams in the league that have a 3-3 record. And I'm a little worried because our last match this stage is against the London Spitfire, who have been another one of those teams that have been, kind of inconsistent at times, but really good at other times. So who knows what to expect? But we do have some reinforcements on the way, Slambo. And, as someone who brought in, and utilized a black belt in the Dad Joke Dojo, I feel like maybe you should introduce what news this actually was for the Dynasty.
Well, Totem, what I would like to share with everyone out there is we've got some very highly illicit news. Thank you very much. No, we I mean, pretty much as it was stated here in my awful joke. I that was my comment I made in our private chat as soon as I saw the news, just because I like, there were rumors of this brewing, but just to see them kind of officially announced, it was the moment. And I followed it up with the widow dabbing emote. I think that's an important element to the story. But I mean, before you kind of, I want to ask you more about your thoughts on them as individuals. But the thing that I remember my first reaction, and I still think it's going to be the most compelling piece of this, is what it does to the team chemistry. And not necessarily in the sense of like who's going to start, if they're going to come in and immediately start, but it really, whenever you have teams that have a lot of experienced players or teams that maybe are struggling and you bring in new blood to the team, sometimes that lights a fire under people's butt because they don't want to lose their spot. They don't want to have to move to an off role. There could be some motivations there. So I think that's the interesting part for me, or maybe that's the optimistic glass half full side of things, because I'm on the solar coaster for life. But I guess for that's kind of my take on it. But I just really, for you, if you could tell me your thoughts on kind of the impact that Illicit and Highly could make as individuals.
Yeah, so for me, it's pretty evident here that we've kind of been in this transition, obviously, since we signed Fisher. And this was kind of one of our concerns going into the season, was how the Dynasty were going to adapt to that sort of level of aggression at the front line. And I feel like still to this point, we haven't quite figured out who we are as a team. And the other side of this, too, is we've kind of been at this standstill moment where we're still trying to find someone to pair with Fleta. And, Munchkin's done pretty good, but Illicit, plays a lot of projectile, too. So it's just like one of those things where there's a lot of crossover between Illicit and Fleta. So there have been times where Fleta has been meta. There's been times where he's fallen silent. And I'm hoping that, internal competition where, maybe we'll start to see Fitz a bit more. We actually got to see him a bit this past week when they played their, I'm not going to say the B squad, but, they were facing the Washington Justice. So we basically had like our B team versus the D team of the Overwatch League in that series, which
Shots fired.
Wow. That was something to behold. And Justice probably going to go 0-7. So I'm really curious to see if we're going to have another team go out and just fire their head coach. More on that later.
Jeez.
But for me, at the end of the day, is we have a lot of these pieces, or not all of them, but some of the pieces still from that Lunatic High core. And there have been times where we just kind of had this level of inconsistency, despite what level of regard we may have for them as players. I think it was last week when we kind of talked about where we would rank Ryu Shehan in regards to the Zenyatas in the league. And I know on the cast, they were talking about like how he's like not top 8. And I know Spider and I both kind of agreed, like he's kind of in like the middle of the pack right now. Very true can be said in regards to where the Dynasty are in the standings, because they are 10th out of 20th. But the thing is, you have Hylie, who is coming from the sister squad of O2, Ardiant. And we've already seen Violet kind of just come in and become this own entity for the San Francisco Shock. And I don't know Hylie as well as Violet. And for the most part, like with these sister teams, whoever the lesser team is, and in this case, this is the O2 Blast team, which is where Hylie came from, he's not going to be as standout of a player as compared to a Violet. So I can't really rank him right now, but what he does bring is some flexibility outside of just Ana and Zenyatta, because he does play Sombra as well. So it's kind of like this weird combination of, one, trying to motivate your starters, because you have two players that I'm not going to say have been complacent, but maybe have started to get a little bit too comfortable with their starting job, who have just been passable, but they haven't really had the breakout performance that we would have expected yet. So I feel like this is going to be good enough motivation to hopefully nudge them along to where they need to be. And if not, we have two suitable people that can come in and, maybe make the most of the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, well said. And I think that pretty much lines up exactly with what I was saying. But I don't want to admit it. And it hurts as you were saying it, and as I was thinking about it, is like letting go of certain players. But I do feel like there is some room in here, especially around Ryu Jae Hong, that if there's not much improvement within a certain period, he's probably on the hot seat a little bit more, because that DPS lineup, like to your point, I don't think it's really settled yet. So that really wouldn't be a shakeup. But when you look at your support duo, lineups are usually fairly consistent outside of a few rosters. So I just feel like that would be the one in the conversation that would make the most sense for us to speculate on. And it hurts to say that, dude. Okay. All
right. I would not be surprised, though, if Ryu Jae Hong would be someone to transition to a coaching role or a player.
No, I mean, of course. I mean, they called him like old man or big brother on the team, since his first day. He's definitely an older player by age, not just also experienced in the league, and certainly shown prowess on so many different roles, showing his like general game sense, and that I think will translate well to coaching. But it hurts, Totem. It just hurts. Okay.
Yeah, and the thing too is, you can always talk about how good Ryu Jae Hong's Ana is, but we haven't gotten to see the Nano Blade sleep darts, because Genji is nowhere to be found primarily in the vast majority of the games. That being said, we did see a little bit of Genji this past week.
A little bit.
Right? But, dive is not necessarily like a go-to strat, in this current meta, since it is, kind of 3-3. But, you also have teams like Chundu who are just like, nope. And then they surprise us and still ended up running a lot of 3-3 in that series, which we'll get into here in just a little bit. But moving on, I have to say, like, Captain Planet lately has really been knocking it out of the park. He's been doing some more stats pieces in regards to the Overwatch League website. And last week, we kind of talked about something that was dealing with team fights and like what defines a team fight, how teams are doing in team fights. And this one kind of elaborated a bit more into some different sort of like subcategories, I think would be the best way to describe it. So this one is taking a look at first deaths and first blow. So who is dying first, who is landing the first elimination, and trying to see, how that like evolves in regards to the team aspect of the fight, because there's some pretty interesting statistics that we definitely need to mention. So first, let's talk about the teams that are dying first in regards to, who's the first color to appear in the elimination feed. This should not surprise you, Slambo, but the lowly Washington Justice are leading the pack. First, a death rate of 60.4%. Probably not any ground shattering news in that regard. But
wait. Okay, no, there's no
No,
surprise. Keep
no,
going.
no, nothing too surprising. But what I was surprised by were the two teams that are ranked 19th and 18th. Or well, I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. It's the teams that are dying, the second most and third most, but technically they'd be like last. So we have the Boston Uprising, who are at 54.4% for first death rate. And then we have the LA Gladiators at 53.8%. I have to be honest, I was really surprised to see both of these teams listed on there. I guess for Boston, it's more of a situation of maybe the frontline aggression is getting punished. But then I was like, well, Roar seems to die first in almost every fight, so right. I would have been more confident maybe the Gladiators would have been below Boston Uprising, but that actually was not the case, which was a nice surprise.
Yeah, and not far behind those two teams are the Valiant and Chengdu. And then the only other team above 50% in first death rate is the Seoul Dynasty. Everyone else in the league, is a sub 50%. Now, what I was thinking about the Defiant, because you're right, the Defiant super, kind of, low on the list. If you look at their ability to win the team fight after the first death, they're like third to last in the league, to your point. Mm-hmm. And if you notice, their percentage isn't that good. I mean, there's teams at 44, 34, 44, 42, 44. They're at 47. So what they're doing is just winning the most important team fights. They're not necessarily winning all the team fights. They're just barely winning enough team fights, but they seem to be winning them at the right times because they've won the games they've needed to be in the position they're in going into this last week.
Yeah, another cool thing that they did is they were taking a look at the team fight win rate after they had suffered a loss on their team. So, if they had lost a member, them getting eliminated, who would be kind of at the top, where these are the clutch teams, so to speak. And I have to say, I was really surprised with one particular team being on here. Not so surprised by the other two, but it's kind of interesting that this one particular team is in the discussion. So we have the Vancouver Titans, the New York Excelsior, so we have the top two teams in the league right now. And then the third team that's in the discussion is the Seoul Dynasty. What is going on? So we have... Yeah, it's very conflicting to me as a Dynasty fan, but basically what's happening is with this team fight win rate after the first death, all of these teams are posting 18% plus. You have the Titans, who are leading overall with 18.9%, with the Dynasty and NYXL actually both sitting at 18.2%. So sure, there's been clutch moments if we're not landing the first blow and we're actually fighting a 5v6, but it's just interesting to see how much the dynamic kind of shifts when it comes to either landing the killing blow or someone having a killing blow on us first.
I don't know. I just feel like that is pure talent on your roster. Like the ability to turn a fight with a person down or to really know who to focus or how to deal with the complete change in mechanics when it's 5v6. That's just pure talent. And if you kind of look at how it ranks teams, I'd say up to the top 5, we'd argue that a lot of that's fairly accurate. There's a couple teams that maybe belong in the discussion, like San Francisco and Atlanta in the top 5 outside of Paris and Gladiators, but all good good that seem to be able to turn it around, with the exception, I guess, of Paris not having a pure talent roster. The other 5, I would say, have, pretty impressive resumes. I don't know. That's at least my guess on why they're able to pull through.
Yeah, what is interesting, though, considering that they are tied, is just a difference in regards to the survivability. Because you have Seoul, who have a first death rate of 50.7%, and New York actually has the best in regards to first death rate at only 34%. That's a staggering differential there for them to be tied in these clutch moments. But you have New York leading a lot of these categories. They're also landing the first blow, better than every other team in the league at 58.8% of the time. And when they land that first blow, they go on to win 86.5% of those fights. So really staggering numbers. But we have also seen an increase in regards to the average of winning a team fight based on when you get the first blow. And this year it's at 81% on average, which is up from 72%. Now, I have to say, that's kind of interesting when you kind of consider what the meta is, because there's a lot more survivability in a sense. So I thought it was kind of weird that there's like this increase at all. Because if anything, I thought that maybe with more sustain, that it would kind of just fluctuate things on the opposite end, because you're not really having that DPS character or that burst potential that you would otherwise.
No, but I think you had a lot more characters that had independent movement abilities that could escape fights so you could pull out. It seems in the modern era, like when there's a team fight, it's like a team wipe.
Mm-hmm.
And like when the fights truly play out and there's not as much of that individual character pulling out. But I don't know, like, maybe teams could I'm just trying to guess, Totem, like why teams might be like kind of shifting that win rate on the team fight percentages. Just there were less true fights to have. I don't know, or that doesn't make sense either. I don't know. That I'm just trying to put it together, because just posing the question you did is perplexing, because you would think it should be the opposite based on the 3-3. So I don't know. I got nothing, Totem. I got nothing.
Maybe it's just the overaggression of the front lines that we're seeing, or just punishing whoever the shield bearer is on the teams, because that does tend to happen a lot more with the main tanks dying first.
But I feel like that's just like, yeah, it's just one character, but that's where the snowball begins. Mm-hmm. So when you lose that shield, that main tank, you lose your ability to kind of create space. So yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so with that in mind, I do know they kind of break down further, look at individual heroes, and I don't want to touch too much on that, but I will note that I know they've been throwing out like the Zarya stats a lot when it comes to like if Zarya dies first, what the team fight win percentage is at that point, and that number has been increasing steadily. At one point it was at 5.6 or like 5.8. Now it is at 7.8% all those team fights when you lose your Zarya first. So still the worst hero to lose across the board in the current meta. But it's kind of interesting to see, like, we have seen that number increase over time. And, with Zarya being such a key component and really the damage dealer, it's definitely not the one you want to lose. And to an extent, I feel like Zenyatta would probably be the second most vital one, primarily just because of the amount of pressure that we've seen the flex supports put it on, especially with the Discord orb as well.
Yeah, and taking a look, I like that it kind of had called out that how well like Shaz is doing of not dying first, along with Twilight and Jonak. And I really think I enjoy it when articles like this correlate like what the eyeball test or what we feel or what we sense show that data represented. Like you're like, oh, okay, yeah, very good. And also I think that if you look at the same thing for Zenyatta's, why your question was kind of, are they most or second important, most important? I definitely feel like, right about the second most important statistic. I think that's why it's presented this way. But Twilight and Jonak, again, doing well on the team fight win rate after the first blow. Again, it's kind of lining up with the eyeball test. But the one outlier that surprised me is, maybe it's actually pretty appropriate if the stats were pulled after Sunday. But Luffy from Shanghai Dragons showing up pretty well in the Zenyatta if he gets the first pick. I thought that was interesting. I think that's someone I didn't really like eyeball test, didn't ever stand out in the kill feed. Maybe it's because you're kind of tainted by those names of the stars of the player, but I don't know. Just did not eyeball test. I was like, what? Really? Oh, okay.
Well, all I know is Slambo. I've been playing him pretty much every week in Fantasy Overwatch League, and he has been putting up some absurd numbers. So
Really? Okay.
he's doing something right. I think he
As,
posted,
I guess, and that's probably why you beat me in fantasy Overwatch. So
I want to say like 211 this past week, which is a
okay, all right, rub it
pretty
in.
pretty good amount.
Rub it in.
Just saying. But anyways, let's talk about some of the other teams that have clinched a playoff spot. So, I already mentioned, we have New York Excelsior sporting that perfect 7-0 record. Well, it's no 10-0 like Boston did, but, we got shorter stages. So
it's still an undefeated stage.
It is. The question is, will they go the Boston route and then collapse in the playoffs? That remains to be seen, but
it's messed up.
It could happen. You never know. There's a lot of hype behind New York Excelsior right now. I'm just saying.
It's always hype. It's New York.
And, Jonak has been talking pretty high level trash talk, which is fantastic. I love to see it. And I hope we get more of that. But we do have some additional teams that have clinched a spot. So yes, New York, they have a top seed. They are atop of the Atlantic Division with a plus 16 map differential. And we have two other teams that have clinched a playoff spot so far. So those teams are none other than the Vancouver Titans and the Toronto Defiant. So Titans, this past week, they narrowly escaped the Chengdu Hunters and are one win away from completing a perfect stage themselves. And as of right now, they are sporting a plus 14 map differential. And of course, they have the best record in the Pacific Division. So I feel like at this point, Slambo, there's been a lot of talk behind Runaway coming into the Overwatch League, how they would fare. And you and I felt pretty confident going in. We saw kind of like the same thing happen with London, with New York in the inaugural season. Lo and behold, the trajectory has been the same for the Titans, and Vancouver has really proved themselves. Now it's just a matter of, can they beat New York? And I feel like we're just a week away for that potential showdown and not having to wait until stage 4 otherwise.
What do you want me to say to that? Like, it's an inevitability. I feel like at this point, I don't feel like even no matter what path these teams need to take to see each other, they're going to see each other for the stage 1 playoffs. So at some point we are going to get that matchup, and that really kind of can do nothing but good for the Overwatch League. Let's just keep it real. That is such a good thing to have it happen. Now, as far as we know that Defiant are in. It's, if you kind of look at the standings, one thing that stands out to me is the Eternal. Even though they're at a 2-3 record, they're still technically alive. Now they need quite a bit to go their way, and they need to win a lot of maps within there. But it's interesting to see a team that right now sits at 16 that still is alive, but that's due to the nature of how the games are played and how things are spaced out and structured. So I totally get it. I love how close a lot of these teams are, from 8 to, even to 11. And I would say even from 8 up to pretty much where Atlanta is at 6, depending on how things go over the next, couple days of Overwatch, a lot of different things can play out. A lot of teams are still alive in the action. Every map is going to count. Every round is going to count. Every meter on the payload. I really like the new formats of playoffs and the new format with all these teams, because I do feel like it really ramps us into the playoffs at the end of each stage with higher stakes. So, and a much closer, like a couple teams that are sitting there at the bottom of the pack, but Totem, there's a lot of teams here that are just a game or two out of it, that were a map or two out of being considered for the playoffs going into the last week of the stage. So a really balanced overall league picture I'm looking at here, and I think that's healthy for the scene. You need your top dogs, you need your underdogs, but you need the middle of the pack to be real healthy, and that's what we have.
Yeah, it's really crazy to see just the level of parity in the league that we have, because I'm sure you saw the post on Reddit that had like all of the teams that were like in circles and who was beat who, and then this team that beat that team, and then that team beat the next team, and there was like 16 of the 20 teams that were listed on there outside of like the Titans, Justice, because they haven't beat anyone, Valiant, and New York. Like everyone else was on that sheet. And I was just like, this is absolutely crazy. And it just makes you think, well, we know at the end of the season, after stage 4, we have that play-in tournament to determine the final 2 slots for the playoffs. That will be between the 7th through the 12th ranked teams. And I am really hoping that when we get towards the end of the season, that those teams that are all clumped are still going to have that level of parity at that point. Because if right now is any indication, it seems to be panning out that way, which is crazy to see already. But definitely something to keep an eye on. But man, Toronto really has been a surprise team. And I will say, like, for the most part, initially, I was like, whoa, this... Like, look, knowing the Apex background of the teams that they kind of built around, I was just like, their coaching staff is okay, but I was unsure about how they would do, but they've really been a surprise team, and that was not a team that I would have pegged to be, like, a top 5 team, but lo and behold, like, they keep moving up and up throughout, like, our Overwatch League network rankings. They seem to be top 5 pretty much for everyone at this point. And while I wouldn't say that their path to the playoffs has been as pretty, because they are sporting like a 5-2 record, but their map differential is only +5, so it's not like they've been having these blowout wins per se. But it's just crazy to see, like, we've had this team who, for the most part, has probably been pretty overlooked by a vast majority of the community. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if, you know, you're winning by 1 map, you're getting a blowout. If you're winning series, chances are you're going to punch your ticket into the playoffs. And sure enough, we have the Toronto Defiance defying all expectations, so to speak, and they punched their ticket to the playoffs. And this is a team that has picked up a lot of momentum and some pretty big wins so far. So this is going to be the team that I'm really anxious to see how they're going to do when we get to the playoffs, because, you know, we kind of like looked back and we saw how Aid was doing when Neko was serving his suspension, playing an off role for him when he was playing Zenyatta, and he looked fantastic. Then Neko came back, Neko took over the start and flex support role, Aid went to the bench, and we saw Roki come in, and I know there was a ton of discussion about, you know, how he was going to do, and I have to say, like, what a difference an additional week has made. Roki has really stood out on that Lucio role, and we've seen a lot of plays being made from that position that maybe we haven't necessarily been seeing outside of just separation plays when it comes to setting up the self-destructs. But I've been really enthused to just take a look at just how vital that main support role has started to become in this meta.
Yeah, and certainly a good compliment to the other, you know, side that they have there with Neko, who brings a ton of experience and really able to help out whoever is in that other role, but certainly a lot of onus on that individual to also show up too. And Ivy, I mean, I know everyone talks about Ivy, everyone calls out Ivy, but I mean, certainly has some work to do on some facets of his game when it comes to Zarya, but definitely I think a huge part of that machine right now that's churning the Toronto Defiant, a lot of young talent that we really didn't see coming. I wonder if we're going to talk about people overlooking them later, Totem. We probably should.
We probably should. You know, luckily, you know, I did change the fact or fiction questions quite a few times because of another thing that we're just about to talk about too.
Okay, all right. Well,
which is interesting because I kind of had like this fact or fiction question about maybe firing a head coach because you couldn't win a game during the stage.
Weird. And should it be fact or fiction? Totem as a crystal ball.
And sure enough, it's fact.
It's true. Fact, he has a crystal ball.
So I peered into the future, and I knew that the LA Valiant were going to get rid of their head coach, Moon. Now, I have to say, the Valiant, they're 0-7. Space has been trying his damnedest to to carry this team on his back, but there's just too many issues with the team. So I'd say this has been a drastic decline for the Valiant going back to last season in the final stage. This is a team that went 9-1 on their route to take home the Stage 4 title. And Moon is out of the picture. We have the Valiant looking to find a replacement coach. And during that time, we will have their assistant coach, Packin10, standing in as the team's interim head coach. Of course, you'll still have Stoop and Donzu continuing their work in their current positions. And I know Valiant also got rid of one of their translators, their assistant team manager, Korean Mulan. And, it's been an interesting week for the Valiant, and I'm sure you've heard about this, Lambo. But there's been a lot of talk on Reddit and on social media about a certain Inside Valiant clip with Custa that has been making the rounds about him being too smart.
Brain too big, kid. Sit on the bench. Hey, quit trying to call shots because we can't handle those shots. Those are too big a brain for me. Go ahead and park yourself right there on the bench. Yep. Have a seat. Yep. Sorry, you're too smart. Sorry about that. What the hell, dude? What the hell?
I honestly don't know what to make heads or tails of that. I feel like that's definitely something that's just complete BS. It has that feeling of it. Now, I'm not going to say that Custa, maybe it's like a Shaw called an issue, or maybe he's just not as comfortable in the meta, but to flat out say, like, hey, our players are too dumb to know how to play this, so let's just bench the person that might understand it the best, is just so weird. Weird. There had to be some weird edits in that particular clip that made it sound a lot worse than it actually is, but it's definitely left a lot of us kind of scratching our heads in regards to what Custa's situation actually is. Outside of, the meme of someone posting like the Where's Custa in the Where's Waldo postcard book that someone did, which was fantastic, by the way. I absolutely love that.
Very well done, yes.
But it's just one of those things. So I had to say, Slambo, it was a rough turnaround for the Valiant. And are you at all surprised by them actually making a quick move, getting rid of the head coach, knowing that chances are we are going to see a meta shift here going into stage number 2? Would you give Moon, maybe a couple of games in that stage? Or do you feel like at this point we're nearing dire straits situation where the Valiant need to have a turnaround now?
Wow. I'm going to save a little bit of this for later, but just kind of want to answer focusing more around Moon. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if some of the rumors are true of what we're hearing, if it all has to do with some individual things going on with Custa, that would be fine, that if that was the reason. But from what me and you are looking at and what we're watching, it appears to be like a clear lack of direction and a clear lack of management of the team, because the team on paper has a ton of roster talent, or the roster has a ton of talent. God. And I really just feel like that would make more sense if that's really truly the reason that he's getting let go, is for the mismanagement of the players. But I certainly actually kind of am hopeful that the true reason he got let go is he didn't play Custa, and him and Custa didn't get along. And that basically is kind of, that reminds me of like a Tom Brady situation, where the Tom Brady almost runs the team because he's such a talented player that he may have been butting heads with Moon, who really wanted to have more control, and Moon might have been in front of the team making calls, and Custa's like, no, mate, that's not how that goes. No, that doesn't make any sense. Discrediting him. I'm just going down a rabbit hole here in my head of scenarios, but really to kind of, again, some of my point is that it's really more fascinating to me at the moment to find out why he got let go. I'm not as worried about the impact. And I guess just to simply answer your question, yeah, I'm a little bit surprised at the timing. I'm a little bit surprised. I think 7 games is a bit weak for you to kind of cut ties with your head coach. But I was thinking back, and I think the Valiant have had quite a bit of movement in that head coach position since the inception of the team. So I think this is a little bit more in line with their management of making decisions, quick decisions. And there's definitely shades of Dallas Fuel somewhere in here. I'm feeling real weird about this. It's like real like echoes of season 1 here. But I guess I'll leave it at that for now. And I'm surprised by the timing, but not surprised by the people that did it.
Yeah, it is important to note too that for the Valiant, going back to last season, they had Gunba, who is now with the Boston Uprising. Damon is with the Paris Eternal. So they're working with less pieces on the coaching staff overall. That being said, though, I feel like at the end of the day, it was probably Custa, Saw Moon, eating cereal, and eating it with water instead of milk. I feel like that was the final straw. Because that's been one of those memes in your Overwatch League.
I know, but it makes me nauseous for some reason. I don't know why. Water and cereal. Oh.
It's the same thing with like, do you pour in the milk first or the cereal? Because that's another one of them.
No, Spider.
Spider, no, you did not. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into a new segment for our show tonight, which we are doing a trial run of without Spider. He can maybe, do whatever in the chat. And that is stock up and stock down. So this is going to be like evaluation of who's doing really good, who's doing bad. Look at team or player performances. So Slambo, why don't you go ahead and start us off? Where are the stocks rising and falling right now for you?
For me, on the Scrimbuck Stock Exchange, because I know you didn't name it that, Totem, but that's what I named it. Okay. The stock is going up for the LA Gladiators. Quite frankly, a team that we all had in the top 5 for our power rankings as we kicked the season off. We saw a bit of inconsistency. We said to ourselves, oh, that's just Decay's not there yet. Just wait till Decay gets there. Just wait. And then Decay showed up and we were kind of like, huh? Where was this what we were waiting for? And, as we went into last week, they were sitting there with 1 win. And we just didn't have any belief. But this week, they showed up. And they showed up strong against Atlanta and against Guangzhou. Atlanta certainly, as I watched that match, it felt like, geez, I guess I'm going to be mean tonight too, Totem. It felt like the Gladiators were playing the Washington Justice. Just how fragmented Atlanta looked, how out of sync and out of sorts they did. But I still want to give credit to the Gladiators. I still don't want to take as much away from like Atlanta not looking great, but the Gladiators played really well and really tight, and they kind of showed something. And then again, they carried that momentum on against Guangzhou. So a team that the stock is up. I mean, whether they made the playoffs or not, they did make the stage 1 playoffs. I still am very optimistic about their future. And actually, if you look at our last power ranking video, I even make a comment that I know they're down low, but we know that this team will turn it around. And I didn't know it'd be that quick. Again, a little bit too late for the playoffs, but still a team whose stock is up. Do you want me to talk about my stock is down? Because Totem, I'm gonna tell you why I think there's another team and their stock is down. And let me tell you, we're gonna go all the way from Los Angeles, California, to the City of Angels. Oh wait, that's the same place. To the Valiant, the other team in town. I'm glad you like that, Totem. The other team in town, the LA Valiant. This team, the 0-7 meme is real. We just mentioned that Moon is gone. So why am I just saying they're down because they lost their coach? Well, kind of. Yes, I mean, I would have had them here before that, but now after the news of the coach, outside of Moon being gone as an individual, and what the reasoning is, this has a huge impact to that roster, and a ripple effect. I think we may see a situation where a new coach is appointed interim coach, or they hire a new coach, and for a brief period the team shows like a sign of life or just some freeness to their game, and they win a match they're not supposed to, and then that might die out. So I think they need to kind of be careful about who they pull in and who they put in that position, because I would hate to see another head roll because of this roster's inability to kind of put it together. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's the roster's fault. It might have been a pure problem with Moon, but right now, as of going into next week, my stock is low with the LA Valiant, and I know they're done, for the stage, and they're taking the playoffs off. But just going into the next stage, my confidence level is very low. They have some time to figure it out and reset. They have some time to gain some new synergy. But a team that, again, the stock is down. Later, nerds.
You joke about that trip from LA to LA, Slambo, but I've seen LA traffic. That could be a pretty lengthy
Not wrong.
trip.
Not wrong. You're right. Okay, fair enough.
But anyways, for me, in regards to who I'm increasing stock value in, I'm going to look at someone that I'm going to be talking a little bit more about in just a little bit as well, and that is from the Chengdu Hunters, their DPS player, or more precisely, they're a Hanzo / Pharah player, Jinmu. So Jinmu has really been an exciting player to watch. Primarily, one, I just love watching Pharah play, and lo and behold, he's been doing a lot of work. And this is even like dating back to last week when I know we had the Hunters versus the Dragons, and there was a moment on Volskaya where we got the EMP set up. We saw like a 5k barrage coming through, which led to the fastest Volskaya cap in Overwatch history at like 6:33 in the time bank. And then this week, also on Volskaya, we got to see Jinmu rocking a little bit of Hanzo, and he just gets a casual 4K when he's just on the flank against the Toronto Defiant. And this sequence included like this ridiculous snapshot onto Envy's Tracer, which was actually after a snapshot that was on a Lucio as well. So to hit those shots back to back, snap on two heroes that are known to be speedsters, was just awe-inspiring, and I cannot wait to see more of Hunters running DPS, which luckily is quite often, because that's kind of like their go-to when they decide to not test themselves against one of the better 3-3 teams, which had surprising results, which we'll get into. In regards to stock being down, well, Paris, it's time to talk about your Zarya play. For one, this totally cost me in Fantasy Overwatch League, and that's primarily one of the reasons, but it's also just the fact that the Zarya play has not been clean for Paris Eternal, regardless of if it is Soon or Shadowburn. And I'll give Shadowburn kind of a pass, just because, he's been in against some of the better Zaryas in the league, but Soon across the board has not put up good numbers. So when it comes to the Zarya players in the league, you have Soon, who is landing the third lowest first blows in team fights, and is the third lowest overall at winning team fights after landing the first blow. So it's not a guaranteed team fight win whenever Soon is in there. And he actually has the highest first death rate of any Zarya in the league this season at 11%. Oof, that is rough. We got benched this week after playing a map. We saw Shadowburn come in, and he was not that good either. So I don't know what's going on with Paris Eternal, but their Zarya play has definitely been one of the weak points on that team. And I have to say, yes, they still technically are not eliminated from playoff contention for Stage 1 at least, but even if they get a win, they still are probably going to have to look at a 4-3 record just to make the playoffs, and I am not confident that they are going to be able to pull off 2 wins to close out this stage. So across the board, it's been rough for Paris, which was a team that we touted as one of the better 3-3 teams, and then they kind of just had a couple of rough losses, and then their Zarya play has just diminished over time. So definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. But Slambo, you and I are ready to debate some topics here in fact or fiction. And, as I said, this has been something that I had to change multiple times just due to the fact that some of the stuff that I'd put down kind of already came to be. So with that being said, we're going to talk about a couple of different teams out there. One of these is actually submitted from one of our patrons, which we'll get into, which I thought was interesting because he mentioned Ed, even though Ed's not on this particular show. But that's besides the point. So first up, let's talk about the San Francisco Shock. So looking at the strength of schedule, Shock have definitely had one of the hardest schedules in Stage 1. They are in line to make the Stage 1 playoff. So fact or fiction, Slambo, a Shock playoff berth would be the most impressive given that strength of schedule in Stage number 1.
Fact. I know you said that we probably would debate here, but if you say this is fiction, me and you are going to have to maybe come to blows over this, because you can't say they haven't had a tough schedule. Their weakest game, obviously, being Washington. Guess what? Every team that's played Washington can say the same thing, and that's not their fault. So you can't hold that against them. I thought when they finally beat Hangzhou, they were like one of the teams that helped knock Hangzhou back down to earth for us. Like, they reminded us the Spark weren't as good as we thought they were. And certainly losing to Vancouver and New York, there's really no shame in it. And I understand if you look at the score of that New York game, 4-0, that looks a lot more rough. But I'll tell you, that was not a 4-0 series. Like, those maps were close. I gained respect. I put Shock up on my list after that. And then certainly just to handle Paris when they needed to, just reaffirmed that the game against New York wasn't a fluke. So I think that the battle-hardened schedule helped them. Iron sharpens iron. I think they are one of the best teams in the league, certainly top 5. And I think the schedule has been one of the hardest. And even that's kind of, why they might not have the best record. They certainly are one of the best teams based on that schedule.
I will say, out of all the teams that are probably going to clinch a spot, yes, the Shock have been most impressive, but I feel like for me, I am more impressed by the fact maybe a little bit more compared to the strength of schedule, because it has been a rough schedule, as you mentioned, but it's a fact that this is a team that when you look at them, they always kind of have that question mark of the main tank. And we're like, okay, they got Smurf, they got Super, and we've been pretty hard on Super in the past. And when you look at the amount of resources, or just how close they work with that main tank role, that to me has been the most impressive, because we all kind of felt like if the Shock have a weakness, it is going to be at that position, but they're very deep everywhere else. And we didn't quite know if teams were going to be able to expose that front line. And for the most part, teams have not been able to figure it out. They just have this really good team synergy. And while they may not be...
They have a Sinatra. Sorry, go keep
Yeah,
going.
They do have Sinatra. Now, they may not have beaten some of the upper echelon teams in the league, but they're above kind of like that gatekeeper status where, they can still beat any team, but they're not losing to teams that they shouldn't be losing to. And that to me really speaks a lot about where they are right now. So it's a team that has a lot of potential, that is ready to make that next step. And I feel like this is going to be a team, when all is said and done, that is probably going to finish top 5, which is where a lot of the community kind of pegged them, just based on the amount of depth that they have on that roster. So absolutely, this one is going to be fact. So moving on, this is going to be a team that we talked a little bit about earlier. And I have to say, there's definitely some teams that have flown under the radar. So fact or fiction, Slambo, the Toronto Defiance have been the most overlooked team in the Overwatch League this stage.
Ooh, I mean, this one actually, not really being funny. I certainly can see why you'd think I'd go immediately to fact, but I'm going to say fiction here. They certainly are a team that is overlooked or was overlooked, but I truly feel like and I guess again, this kind of depends on what your definition of overlooked is, but I feel like Atlanta was more of that team for me. Not, and that's why I'm even hesitating to say it, is I understand from a fan perspective and the cheer and the hype and all that, the moment Atlanta had any success, everyone jumped right on that. But I also was like on this opinion that, and so was everyone else, that it was just going to fall off the rails the moment they came up against like some decent competition. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it was a team that everyone constantly was second guessing. No one ever really was cheering for the Defiant or like believed in the Defiant in that sense. It was just more so that no one was talking about them, period. So I guess, again, it depends on your definition of overlooked, because certainly we weren't talking about the Defiant. So yeah, and that answer, yes. But the team that I don't think anyone really believed in, even when they had moments of brilliance, was the Reign, and audibly people were out there speaking out against them. So I will just for the sake of this debate, hopefully you say something different. Go.
So for me, there's two ways to kind of look at this. I am going to go fiction. And there are two teams that come to mind, and these are for two completely different reasons. For one, you have Washington Justice, who a lot of people are just looking at, as I dub them, kind of like the D-League team, so to speak, who everyone's kind of like taking that Shanghai approach season one, where they don't feel like they need to practice, maybe, but they've been slowly improving over time, and I feel like they're still not getting any sort of recognition at all from some of the other teams out there. And, you know, we've seen the statistics, and they're definitely not the prettiest numbers by any means, but they're slowly starting to build up that potential. But I have to say, like, I definitely feel bad for Otto being on that team. It is a rough go. The other team I'm going to bring up, and this is for a completely different reason, are the Chengdu Hunters. Primarily, this is because they have this style that no one else is running. Ergo, you can't prepare for them. So then, like, what can you do? Like, you can't really look at this team.
I want to say something on that later, but I'm going to hold it. I'm going to wait for it, but I'll wait for that in a moment. But I've got something there. So.
All right. So with that being said, I feel like because of that, you know, Defiant have been overlooked, but I feel like the Hunters and the Justice overall haven't quite been getting the due credit, whereas the Defiant we've kind of taken notice of here, especially in the past couple of weeks. So our power rankings prove otherwise, I feel like, in this case. So next up, speaking of the Chengdu Hunters, you know, this has been a team that is running a lot of firepower. We get to see triple quad DPS. We get to see a lot of hamster that really not any other team is really running. So with that in mind, Slambo, fact or fiction, the Chengdu Hunters are the most fun team to watch in the Overwatch League.
I think it's important to note that what it says is they're quickly becoming the most fun team. And I will say fact. And I think that word is important to me because there's a lot of like really fun teams for me to watch because of, you know, if you've ever listened to the show before, I always say like two words way too much. That's narrative and storyline, because that's what makes sports interesting to me. And that's what I gravitate towards as a fan. So like, you know, you look at, I got my team, the Seoul Dynasty. We've got my Korean team, the Runaway, coming over as the Vancouver Titans. And are they going to stack up? You've got Boston Uprising dealing with some weird contract issues with fusions. You've got, you know, Shanghai trying to get their first win. You've got expansion teams. You know, there's all these things that are going on, and the Chengdu are just sprinkled in here. Just, yeah, we play hamster. You know, yeah, we play some weird DPS comps. Like it didn't like really stick to me. Like it was always fun and cool, but it wasn't an exciting storyline. And then the moment they put Vancouver on the ropes this week, I'm like, oh, this is for real and this can work. And it just kind of shifted into that's a quirky, cute story to a really interesting one in one short matchup is all I want to say. So the way it was written, quickly becoming, yes, as of last week, now you've got my eye. You've always had my like interest. Now you've got my heart, I guess is the way to say this, Chengdu. So don't lose it and keep being exciting, you son of a guns.
Man, I am of two minds here because to me, I'm going to stick to my guns with the team that I've had the most fun watching and say Fiction. And that, for me, it's the Guangzhou Charge. Yes, I do enjoy watching Chengdu, and I feel like after that Titans game, they've kind of elevated their level of play to the point where now no one knows what they're going to run outside of, the triple TPS that we've been seeing time and time again. But there's just something about Happy and just seeing him flex the Widow and just pop off that just makes me smile. And I'm still really liking what the Guangzhou Charge are doing. Plus, they keep subbing in Kib, and as long as Kib is seeing play, I am going to be in a good mood. But Hunters, I will say, they definitely have been picking up some really impressive showings overall. Now, I'm really just curious to see when the meta shifts, how that DPS is going to rank up against some of the other teams in the league. Because right now, when really not that many teams are running DPS, it's working out pretty well because you can abuse like some of the positioning, things like that. But how is it going to work when it's a DPS everywhere is what I really want to know in that retrospect. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But we do have one more, and this is from one of our patrons. And, he kind of worded this weird, and I'm assuming he meant like a top 10 team, but he said Houston is actually a top 10 side despite Ed's ongoing hate. I'm assuming he means they have a top 10 side. So
or like on the top 10 side, like he's saying like a ranking.
Yeah, could be. Well, yeah, so we'll say Houston is a top 10 team. That's the best way to kind of look at that. So Slambo, Fact or Fiction, Outlaws are top 10 in the rankings.
This is fiction. I understand they have this fan favorite appeal. They've got a lot of star-studded talent. They've got Captain America, Linkser, and Cool Matt, and Muma, and Raucus. I mean, the names go on and on as far as, again, community heads, community figures. But when it comes to their schedule, I don't know. I mean, really, their only wins right now are coming from Hangzhou Spark, the Mayhem, and the Valiant. Wins nonetheless, but I just don't see those as like valuable wins. And their losses, while they do have one to New York, are to Boston and to Toronto. And that was really for when they faced Toronto, where we expected Houston to just mop up this expansion team. So maybe we should be a little kinder about that loss because now we know the Defiant as they are today. But I don't know. I just look at kind of at that resume and at these matches and at these scores, and it just doesn't tell the tape of a top 10 team. And I do also understand that when you look at the rankings, they're still alive. So they're not someone that I should count out. And I mean, Bryn, I think it was Bryn on the desk, was pretty much saying they wouldn't get any wins and then won a map that day. So let's see if we can let the curse continue. I don't think Houston wins a map in their matchup against Atlanta. I think they will 0-4 against Atlanta and be eliminated from playoff contention. That was a mic drop. I just did.
I saw that. I figured that's what you were doing. I'm glad you clarified that, though, for the people that are watching on the video and on YouTube whenever it's exported there.
For sure.
After the fact. And I had to say I have to agree. I do not. Okay, so first of all, I'm probably not the best person to ask, considering that I probably crap on the Outlaws more than Ed.
Hey, you're just as corrupted, to be honest.
So I will say Fiction. That being said, like if you look at the current standings, I do know that they are ranked 11th. They basically have the same map differential as the London Spitfire. But when you kind of look at some of the teams that are around them, like the Spitfire, like the Gladiators, and to an extent, like Spark and the Dragons, I don't feel like the Outlaws are a better team. We've just seen too many inconsistencies, either with overlap in support ultimates or just with a question mark in regards to their off-tank position. I will say, though, like, Spree has kind of been like the saving grace for this team in Stage 1. So at least having a Zarya specialist has played a vital role, but it hasn't been enough to elevate that team to the next level. And it's really kind of exposed like some of the other aspects of their game, so to speak. So, we've seen Jake, we've seen Linkser both playing Brigitte, and neither of them have really stood out to me on that role. And that's true about some other Brigitte players in the league. I'm kind of looking at you, Hydration Gladiators. That's also been pretty rough. He's dying a lot. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a team that is probably going to fare better if it's a Widow Junkrat meta. I mean, we've seen Kings Row in the rotation. We haven't seen that out from the Outlaws, so they're kind of putting themselves into a spot where maybe they're not playing to their strengths, regardless of what the meta may dictate, and there's just too much inconsistencies for me to see them as a top 10 team. Is the potential there? Yes. Will they get there? Unlikely. I don't see it happening. So I hate to burst your bubble.
No, I mean, we both were on the same side of that, to be honest. So yeah. Kind of a bummer, because you want to believe, but that's just I don't know. I think I say you want to believe because they're a team that represents a lot of players as individuals that I've cheered for a long time. So I want to believe they're going to turn around, but certainly at the moment, not even close.
I will say, though, Steffi has like the top 10 signs of the Overwatch League. She puts a lot of work into whatever signs she brings to cheer on Linkser. So they have that at least. But
that's, hey, got that going for them. So
yeah, they have a pretty big presence at the arena as well. So
yeah,
the fan sports are definitely there, and it's going to continue to stay there. Same with the Valiant, despite the whole Win0 thing going on. But I know we're starting to get to that point, so let's jump into some of the matches that we want to quickly take a look at before we do our preview. So we had some very interesting games that both went to a Map 5 that we probably didn't expect. So we had a London Spitfire going up against the Shanghai Dragons. And I have to say, like, this is definitely one that screwed my pick'ems. Oh, and I'm sure.
Oh, a lot of people's.
Like pretty much, probably like 95%. I don't know.
I called the Spitfire "Waking Giants" in the Power Rankings video. I regret that. All right, keep going.
Waking Giants that were slain by the dragon.
God, they were slain. Well, I shouldn't say slain. It was a fun match. Leave it at that.
Yeah, so we opened on Nepal and we saw Nuss get an early environmental kill on Coma, and that doesn't allow Dragons to disengage. So yeah, we get first take London pretty quick and easy, and London just don't give up control. And the Dragons end the round 100-0. They had ultimates that went unused, so not a good start for the Dragons. And we moved on to Village, where we saw an early strike really kind of set the tone for the Dragons here. But unfortunately, at one point, they just get forced off the point, and they're unable to take control back, given the Spitfire a 2-0 round. So looking at Nepal Slambo, a couple of standout things to me. One, Fury did not die. I mean, Fury has kind of been the undying, and really, some of the Diva players that we're going to talk about tonight, because I know there's a certain one on, Vancouver Titans who was kind of pulling some similar stints, but basically across the board, you had Prophet, Nuss, Bedosian only having one death apiece, and you had Prophet who had an average energy of 70% on the Paul, which is
ridiculous.
You just don't see those numbers. Now that being said, I know for the most part, like we maybe get like a 60, maybe 62%. Never 70 plus. That's just
not usually. No, that means basically from the time that you started the game and ran from spawn, and then like one death. And that's the rest of the time you had above 70. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Absolutely. So we would move on to Kings Row, where the Dragons pressure the Spitfire into a corner for a very quick A take. And we see Spitfire take a fight far forward when we get towards the end of the map on C, and they just barely have enough time to get back to defend the carts. So really the King's Row standout to me was Dean, who was on the Sombra. He had Hex 16 on the Dragon's attack in route to complete their attack. And on the opposite end, they're just the defense too strong. The Dragons were just on fire, and DM has really started to come into his own. And what's funny, Slambo, is there's always a talk about Carpe Diem because they kind of came into the scene together. And they're side by side. I think it was was it like damage done
and 15.24?
Right.
Like they were 1/10 of a point away from each other, and like damage dealt over 10 minutes. It was amazing. I saw the same thing and just laughed.
Yeah. So I want to get your thoughts on just the rise of Sombra play that we've been seeing, because we've been seeing a lot of Diva players basically swapping out in favor of playing the Sombra. How do you feel like the teams have really utilized her in regards to like her toolkit and just kind of like how the games have been playing out?
I think she adds such a interesting element to the game. I mean, when she's out there, she sticks out like a sore thumb. As far as from a spectator's point of view, especially as that EMP is up and ready, the camera and the casters are generally very focused on the Sombra. When that EMP, it is such a game-changing ultimate. When it's used appropriately. That being said, I think that's where the Sombra play is becoming kind of a glaring strength or weakness for a lot of teams, depending on the individual that's helming that character. And I think that on the King's Row in particular, Guard's Sombra just wasn't able to keep up with Ding's. So that almost was kind of a huge difference for the teams, as you look at King's Row as a whole. I know Guard didn't spend all the time there, also spent some time on Brigitte, but I don't know. I think that I really appreciate where she's at right now in the meta. I like how teams kind of sometimes will swap off that Diva player just because Diva has been so prevalent. So it's really just nice, again, for a change of pace, that Chengdu Hunter's state of mind, just something different, something new. So that really works for me from a spectator's point of view. It makes huge impacts to the team fights. And again, you can kind of see the strength and weakness of a Sombra player pretty easily on film, which makes it kind of, again, pretty fun to do that compare with other teams in the league and other players on that role.
It's crazy too to just kind of see what the alt gain between Sombras has been here lately too, especially in this series, because these players are both known for getting their EMPs pretty quick, but it seemed like Dean was getting about 70 to like 80% of his ultimate charge in every single team fight. So he was basically able to earn it within every fight, which definitely was a game changer in regards to this series. So that would bring us to Temple of Anubis, where this was a very one-sided affair. You had Spitfire, who didn't die.
I think we had that last or 2 weeks ago. We had talked about Slime that didn't die on one map, and it was like a Volskaya where Slime didn't die. And we were all impressed. Yeah, this is a little different, a little more impressive against a good team in a close series. So that makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, and it just kind of speaks volumes about the direction that this series takes, because you had Spitfire, who looked like so dominant on one map, and then we go to Route 66, and then it's just complete opposite. Like you had, you had one team that was like on the rise, and then you just had the Spitfire in a tailspin. It was just
like they were getting spawn camped, I thought at one point, and I'm like, gosh, what's going on here? Like this is not normal.
Yeah, so Badoja basically opens up, finds an early pick on Luffy, and the Dragons just get split up, which just allows for some very easy cleanup for the Spitfire. And the Dragons kept trying to take this high ground approach, and it only netted them one tick, and they weren't able to even get an elimination. So obviously, if you're not killing anyone, chances are you're not going to be able to contest a point at all. I mean, that's just how it works. But there were too many times where Luffy was just getting split off from the Dragons. That was really kind of like their undoing there. Not to mention, you had DM trying to control the high ground. And he was trying to lob those alternate fires from up top. And then he tries to throw the grab. Fury's right there, eats it, falls into the abyss, and you just have Spitfire dominate the team fight to take the 2-1 lead. But then we had Route 66 happen. And then we just had the other side of the coin for the Spitfire. And then you have DM again just leading the lobby in so many different categories. He posted 42 eliminations, 13 final blows. He himself did not die. And he led the lobby in damage with 19.5k. And I have to say, Slambo, my favorite part of Route 66 was when this fight breaks out on B, and we see Dean just backcapping for like 6 meters to get that second point.
That was honestly such a poggers moment, and he was doing the tactical crouch on the edge of the car, and I was like, yes! And it kind of kept the series alive, but that was a huge moment.
And it wasn't just the fact that he got the back cap, it was the fact that you had the Spitfire invest in so much to win that team fight too, because they used like 3 ultimates in that fight, so it swung the ult economy in the Shanghai Dragons' favor, as well as picking up that objective, which technically they didn't need per se, just due to the fact that Spitfire did not look good on their attack at all, but it was definitely one of those moments where it's just like, how do you recover from that? Because the momentum is just completely in the Dragons' favor at that point.
Yeah, no, it definitely was.
All right, so that would lead us to Ilios, which would go all 3 rounds. So, Semba, why don't you take the helm on this one? What did you notice on Ilios, which was our tiebreaker for the series?
So, one thing, and me, I can't always ever like just take anything super serious, but I will say that Jinmu's Hanzo is a little bit better than Prophet's Hanzo. So I don't want to be disrespectful in that sense, but I certainly feel like when you saw Prophet make that switch, I was a little bit excited. And then it was a bit underwhelming. I believe on it was on one of the points, Prophet had a nice double kill with the pulse bomb almost at the same time as Ding had like a couple kills with the rocket barrage at the same time that Diem was rezzed. And there was this really cool transition that they kind of focused on in the replay, which was really nice from that sense. And then as we went to Ruins, things were tied up. It was 99 and it was 99 to 99. Things could not have been closer to finish off the last point. It really came down to Gamsu swinging the hammer to secure the last couple kills. And that last point was really just a true back and forth that went down to the wire. And frankly, I think it was just around Ding and I want to say a clutch play by DM as well that really kind of the DPS lineup for the Shanghai Dragons that won them that final fight. And it really just was as close as it could be for Ilios.
Yeah, for me on Ilios, there were 2 players that basically I felt just dominated the opposition in regards to their roles. So Gamzu had posted almost 5k more damage compared to Gesture. And then Dean was so far ahead of Guard in damage, and he posted like 6.2 thousand more damage, which is a staggering amount for just one map in particular. So that was definitely a series that caught a lot of us off guard. It definitely hurt our pick'ems pretty much for everyone. I don't know that many people that actually tilted in the Shanghai Dragons' favor in that one, but you know what? It's been a crazy season. Shanghai picked up their 3rd win of the season. They defeated last season's champions. London has been hit or miss, but it's just one of those things. Like, I felt like after Route 66, after that back cap, it just escaped London at that point, and there was just no going back. and recovering from that. And I'll be honest, Lambo, after the Titans match, I feel like I need another week to recover. Because it was one of those series.
You know what I always say is, and it's true, I do not smoke cigarettes, but I always say, like, after an intense game like that, like, whoo, I don't even smoke, but I need a cigarette right now. Like, it feels like I just completed some amorous activity. It was a bit exhausting. Now, mind you, I had to watch the first 2.5 maps like on my phone in the car. So I'm going to go back and watch them on the big screen, but I finished, the last couple games of the series on my couch comfortably and was able to really hone in. But I was just struggling to watch the first few, and that scoreboard was freaking me out. I know we'll get into it.
Absolutely. So something that we alluded to earlier was the fact that we had the Hunters who, were up to their normal shenanigans, running heavy DPS compositions. And then as the series progressed, they're like, you know what? Everyone's talking about your 3-3. Well, yeah, we could do that too.
Hey, man. Did you get the joke? Hey,
man. I got you.
All right. Sorry, it's funny because he was a stud on the Reinhardt. Hey, man. But he was awesome.
And I have to say, too, that was one thing. Bumper, and I'm wearing his jersey. He's been talking a ton of shit, right? Like, he's been going for these really big flank shatters. Hunters knew that was going to happen.
Charging people off.
But like
ledges and yeah.
He's been ice skating a full sky, all of that things. But I feel like it's really hard to differentiate, like, when Bumper is just straight throwing or when he's underestimating people. Because I felt like across board, the Titans just didn't think that the Hunters were going to run 3-3 against them. And when they did, they got caught off guard, and they were basically like caught with their pants down. At least that's what it felt like, because... Yeah. When you look at that main tank battle and you just look at the Earthshatters themselves, Bumper was not winning that battle by any stretch of the imagination, whether it was finalizing the kills in the Earthshatters or just getting the stuns or even blocking the Earthshatters from the opposition. And that was not something I would have expected. So it's really interesting to see like this extra dimension of play for the Hunters. And now it's just a question of, well, what look is it going to be this week? Because no one has any idea at this point, but for them to play that 3-3 so well against the Titans is honestly the best thing that could have happened to Chengdu Hunters at this point, because it's just always going to be that thing that's going to be in the back of these teams' minds where they can go toe-to-toe with some of the best 3-3 teams, as well as throw out these very unorthodox things that you just can't really prepare for, that no one else is doing.
No, I don't know. And I will say that some of that certainly can wear off, and there's a bit of a surprise factor with some of it, certainly. But the Chengdu Hunters certainly remind me and epitomize my competitive play experience in Overwatch, and that's everyone just kind of plays whatever the hell they want until things are dire, until they're facing opposition or it's the last point or the last map, and they're like, all right, screw it, let's go goats, and everyone goes goats and you just romp the point. Like, that is Chengdu in this last match. And I didn't want to bring up this facet of it earlier, but usually playing goats would be boring in a way, like, oh, a team switched to goats, great. But to see them do it was a little bit fascinating and a little bit more fun because of who they were before that match. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we got to see Bacon Jack bring out the Ashe on Hollywood, and of course, Bob comes in
and goes to sleep,
and Twilight sleeps him immediately.
Go to sleep. Why don't you take a nap?
Absolutely. So I have to say, like, what was also really interesting to me about Hollywood was the fact that we see Janu is like, you know what? I'm gonna set aside Diva, and he's like, I see your wrecking ball. Let's see how this works out. Well, it turns out the peel for the snipers, because Hunters were running Widow Hanzo for point B, was just too good on that map in particular. So it's interesting that we see these strategies that not only we just normally don't see, but there's really not any team that has been running double sniper either. So whether it's running Widow, Hanzo, or seeing Ash in the mix, we're getting a little bit of everything from the Hunters. And it just felt like on Hollywood especially, they were really punishing Bumper. Bumper was the first to die in numerous team fights. And you had Jinmu, who'd posted the highest damage in the lobby.
Jinmu for the win, Moo.
Yeah, he posted like 21,500, and I think like the second best was like 5,500 lower than that. So it was a pretty staggering differential there between the best and the second best in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Oh, sorry, you're taking a drink. My bad. No, I mean, I guess there's really not much else to really add on top of that, but a noticeable difference on that map in particular.
Absolutely. So that would lead into our Salt map, which was back to Temple of Anubis. And I have to say, we see Slime getting picked off early, and we see Amen pile drive up on the high ground that opens up for the barrage, and then Hunters cap A, and they have over 6 minutes to work with to attack B here. And they try to run the Wrecking Ball, doesn't work out. So what do? They go to a traditional 3-3, and then this is really kind of like that moment where things kind of change in regards to the actual dynamic of this series. So Hunters ended up walking away with 95% of the take on point B on their attack. And we go to their defense, and we kind of see that old school, like Junkrat, Widowmaker defense that we've seen throughout Season 1 with a high ground approach. And we got to see Hoxel bringing out the Genji. And of course, he's patient with the Dragon Blade, waits until the Transcendence wears off before he pulls it out. And that Dragon Blade opens up point A for the Titans. But we see Titans, they basically go all in on B. Hoxel goes to draw the Dragon Blade, gets Shield Bash for his troubles, and that's pretty much why you don't play Genji into a Brigitte.
Mm-hmm. Weird. I didn't... Okay. Thanks, Totem, for that pro tip.
I mean, we knew it was going to happen. It was still a feels bad moment nonetheless. But there was a point where, we see Twilight get in second very late. And Titans at this point were down to like 30 seconds on the clock. And Hunters, they have the ults at the ready. They have the Graviton Surge. They find the cleanup. And what was interesting to me about this is when you go back and you kind of look at the stats do not dictate what the actual results of this map were. Because you had Seaman Su, who had some Zarya heroics, especially on this map. He posted like 28,000 damage. His kill to death was like 7-1. He had like 35 limbs. And then you had Janu only dying twice, and just wasn't enough in this case. A lot of it was just the fact that you just can't run Genji all the time against the Brigitte, and it was just a heavy investment of support ults where they weren't necessarily like overlapping, but it kind of got to a point where they just didn't have the ults necessary at those crucial moments to really get them out of the trenches, so to speak.
Yeah, and it felt like that's probably, like you said, that's the moment where they kind of pulled out that 3-3, but I feel like that's also a moment where Bumper was not prepared for Aming, just in a sense of you're kind of saying he kind of trolls or doesn't take him serious. That was probably a fairly big like shift that Bumper had to make in his mindset that began on this map.
Absolutely. So we had a couple more maps after that. So we had a Route 66, which was honestly, Titans end up forcing them at 5 in here. It
was Johnny who was like, "Hey guys, I'd like to not lose this series. Here's a couple of big bombs for you."
Yeah, we saw a little bit of shatter bombs coming out, which that helped them end up getting B. We had Twilight just fragging out to close out the map. I remember Bumper fell first. And then you just see Twilight in the kill feed, picks up like a casual 3K.
Dink, dink, gets the Lucio jumping across the screen. Dink. I was like, oh, well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah, and the other thing that stood out to me on this map in particular, too, with the Titans, was the fact that Hoxel on the Brigida had only died once. But there were definitely some pretty standout moments for the Hunters. I know Amain had some very good counter shatters. And this is really where kind of like that Reinhardt mind games or the Rhine games was started to go in Amain's favor. So it's crazy to see how over time, Bumper, he gets punished going for the flank shatters. And it's definitely a situation where, if you've done it once, the teams have already seen you try to go for this, so they know that you're going to have that approach or just that mindset. So why would you go to the well again?
I don't know. Are you asking me? Because I don't know. Why the heck would I know?
It's too easily punished, and sure enough,
that's what I mean. Like, there's nothing else to add. What do I mean? Yeah. No.
All right, well, Sambo, we did close out on Nepal, so why don't you go ahead and take the tiebreaker one again?
All right. So for the tiebreaker on Nepal, we found ourselves in an extremely, tense scenario going into that final map. I feel like this is where Bumper was finally able to kind of get a grasp on things and take over. As we went into this map, we felt like the momentum was in favor of the Hunters. But certainly it kind of felt like the first map did in this series where the Vancouver Titans seemed to be a little bit more comfortable on control and were able to 2-0 this map. In particular, it just seemed like the Hunters weren't able to sustain that momentum. I was almost thinking, Totem, that they should have abandoned the 3-3 and maybe have gone forth with something they were a little bit more traditional and comfy with, just because that, although it didn't work out with that composition the first time they played Vancouver on a control map, there was maybe an opportunity again to change it up on them. Ilios, Nepal, I don't think it really mattered to the Titans. Control is something they've been pretty comfy on, and the fact that they even were competitive on Route 66 is a complete surprise from where the record is on escort maps, but that's besides the point. Overall, I felt like this, again, came down to Bumper and Janu really just reining things in and able to control the front line of the Chengdu Hunters, and, again, kind of got their bearings against their 3-3 at this point, and really no better time to. Otherwise, they would have lost the map, but able to take the map 2-0 over the Chengdu Hunters, barely escaping out with a W and letting us all breathe a sigh of relief.
Absolutely. And it was Janu again, living up to that undying moniker, posting 24 limbs, not dying a single time on Nepal. And I have to say, too, like the other major component of this was just the added pressure on the main, who died 11 times compared to Bumper, who had only died 5 times. So a lot more front presence being put on by the Titans to close out that series. But again, Control has kind of been one of their strongest suits, and to pick up, 2-2-0s in convincing fashion in that game mode definitely bodes well for how they're going to do here in the clutch. So it was a narrow defeat. It was definitely a moment where we kind of had to wipe the sweat off of our brow, but that one really could have gone either way. And it just shows Hunters are not a team that you could sleep on, regardless of who you are in this league. But with that being said, week 5 is upon us at this point. Playoffs are right around the corner. It's time to see who's going to be in, who's going to be out. We have 5 teams currently sitting at 3-3. And out of those teams, we have the Guangzhou Charge leading the pack there with a +3 map differential. And they currently hold on to that 8th spot right now. And again, Stage playoffs have 8 teams. So with that being said, just again, as a reminder, we only have games on Saturday and Sunday this week, which again is important to note. It's a change-up because this is one of the travel weeks. So we do have quite a few teams that are on the bye. So, Slambo, looking at the schedule, there are a lot of series on here that are going to matter or play some role in regards to seeing who makes the top 8 for the stage. So, out of these 8 matches, which are the ones that are standouts to you?
All right, so just say on paper, I'm going to go high level. The matches that are very interesting: London and Seoul, Boston and Dallas, Atlanta and Chengdu, Philly and Paris, and Guangzhou and Vancouver. That's the high level list. But if I had to pick one that stands out, it's Atlanta versus Chengdu.
So basically, what I'm hearing is any match that doesn't feature Washington or Houston.
You know, I've got standards. You didn't. You also did not mention Florida. So anyway, I know they're part of the Washington mix, but let's mention them too.
I mean, they have McGravy, so they get a very minor pass. But you know, who knows? To me, I really hate that my two dads have to fight between the Spitfire and the Dynasty. And what's worse about it is, you know, they're both 3-3. They're
Right.
practically. I mean, okay, so the Dynasty have a +2 map differential.
Right, but
Spitfire are -1, but that is not a match.
That's one match difference, right?
That's not a match that either way, as a Dynasty fan, I'm super comfortable with. I know historically we've done better against London than we have New York. So, like, I guess that's some vote of confidence, but it's just both of these teams have had really high highs and really low lows. And we haven't really been able to pinpoint exactly which one is going to show up, especially when, you know, we had Seoul kind of mixing it up here in the last week where we kind of saw some of their alternatives coming into the starting lineup against the Justice, and then, you know, Spitfire coming off of a tough loss. So I don't know quite what to make of that one in particular. But looking at the other ones, you know, Atlanta has 2 trap games, I feel like. You know, Outlaws, you know, we kind of ragged on them a little bit. Can the Outlaws beat the Rain? Probably not. But with what we saw from the Hunters, I feel like stylistically, this is going to be the most intriguing match, primarily just because Rain themselves have kind of been off kilter in regards to what they run, as they are essentially kind of the team that's kind of dictated that forcing you off of the 3-3, but they're not going to be facing a team that primarily runs 3-3. So on paper, that's the one that has like the most what if, like, are they just going to run a lot of triple DPS? Can we see quad DPS? What's the map pool going to be? Are the Hunters going to be like, you know what? You know, we did very well against the Titans running 3-3. Let's just use that as our go-to and see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. But looking at the overall landscape, Slambo, we have 5 spots up for grabs. And as of right now, you know, we have Fusion, Fuel, Rain, Shock, and Charge that are 4th through 8th. But we have the Uprising Dynasty, who are just 1 map behind the Charge. So kind of looking at where the teams fall right now, do you feel like that 8th spot is going to be up between, like, that Dynasty Spitfire game? Because when you look at the lineup, it's not like the Charge have an easy match against Vancouver, so that's not a guaranteed win for them. So that playoff spot for them is in severe jeopardy.
It really is. And, you know, there's also a situation where Boston and Seoul, let's say they hypothetically win both of their games and 4-0. And yeah, like, and nothing, and Guangzhou obviously doesn't improve their differential at all either. Both San Francisco and Guangzhou can be knocked out of playoff contention. So it's really not even just that last spot to your question. There's a couple spots that even the Shock that have played their games, they're done, still potentially are at risk to be knocked out. Now, highly unlikely, you know, I understand that piece of it. And Boston probably not going to 4-0 Dallas this week. And for the Soul, probably not going to 4-0 the Spitfire this week.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, there are scenarios that make both the 7th and the 8th spot still up for grabs. And so that makes this weekend or this upcoming weekend extremely interesting to me.
And kind of looking at another team who is technically the lowest in the standings, but still has 2 matches to play. We have Paris Eternal, who are currently sitting at a 2-3 record with a -7 map differential. So let's say, they win out, they finish 4-3 with a +1 map differential. In your mind, is that enough to earn an 8th spot in Stage 1 playoffs?
I really just don't think so, because Guangzhou, they already are sitting at a +3. So that means if they win their match, which extremely unlikely, they would have to still, win all 4 of their maps, expect the Guangzhou to lose theirs, expect the other teams like Boston and Seoul to not win their matches by a large differential either.
Mm-hmm.
There's just way too many moving parts there for, I think, Paris to come back from the -7 differential. Their record, not that bad. They're still alive. Again, that's not the problem. The problem is that -7 differential coming into this week that is going to haunt them, because even if they win, they need the other teams to lose heartily in order to even be considered for a spot. And the other teams just sit a little too positive right now in the bank going into this last weekend.
Yeah, it kind of puts them into this position where if you're Paris, you have to 4-0 both of your series and then hope that Spitfire takes like a 3-2 against the Dynasty just to make up the differential there, which, that's a lot of things that need to go right in order for you to squeeze into the playoff picture there as well. So it's going to be an interesting week. So definitely tune in. A lot at stake, a lot of high caliber matches this week. But with that being said, I know we are running long, so let's go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best things to do is to go leave us a review over on iTunes. We're always looking for ways to improve the show. If you're looking for additional Overwatch content, we do have Overwatch Recall, which is a listing of Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Fantasy Overwatch League podcast, which is available on our website. And then every Sunday night, we release episodic listings of all the latest podcast episodes that came out in the last week, which you can find on Twitter at OW Recall. And, we're still averaging like 30 podcast releases every week, which is fantastic. And I did interview Snowy from the Weekly Uprising here the other day, which is, if you couldn't tell based off of the name, a Boston Uprising specific podcast. So definitely go check out that interview. Go show them some love. And he interviewed me too after that interview, which was kind of interesting. So I have, a short interview. I think it was like 20 minutes. I shouldn't say short, but that is also going to be on their current episode from this week. So go check that out as well. But Slambo, we have additional ways where people can support us. So why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can do that?
Certainly so. So if you'd like to toss us some additional support, take a look at our Patreon. We have information at patreon.com/OWLN network. Consider tossing us a pledge. Tiers start at just $1 a month. And again, you can find more information at patreon.com/OWL network. As far as how to contact us, in case you need to get a hold of us, we are contact@owlnshow.com. Our website is www.owlnshow.com. You can find us on Twitter @OWLNshow. Our YouTube is youtube.com/Overwatch League Network, all written out. Our Discord is discord.me/OWLNshow. Check us out on Twitch if you're watching us now. Hello, twitch.tv/OWLNshow. Reminder that we are a Twitch affiliate, so please show some support by subscribing, and you're going to earn that sweet OWLN network emoticon. And remember, our podcast, we're always live on Twitch. Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific is our Overwatch League Network show that you're listening to right now. OWL by the Numbers is on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Heroes Never Die, that's our variety Overwatch show, is on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and hosts, they usually do some streaming on Thursdays and Fridays around 7:30. Totem and Spider will split the duties respectively. So, again, I just, appreciate you guys listening to the show. If you want to get a hold of me, you can check me out at Overwatch on Twitter. And Totem, what about you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at TumbleDrunkCTR, and if you want to go give Spider a hard time about missing the show, he is on Twitter at SpiderGD. And just a quick note, this week we are celebrating Heroes Never Die's 3rd anniversary, and with that we are doing a giveaway. So we are giving away 3 bundles of the 400 Overwatch League tokens, and you can find that information on our Twitter at HND Overwatch. So all you have to do to enter the giveaway is just, follow and retweet by March 17th. I will be closing out the giveaway at 8 p.m. Pacific time on the 17th, with winners being drawn on the 18th. So appreciate all the support, guys. It's hard to believe it's actually been 3 years. It's absolutely crazy. And please go at Spider, despite what he may say in the Twitch chat. But with that being said, guys, again, you've been listening to Overwatch League Network. This has been episode number 71. I am your host, Tumbling Drunk, joined on this solar coaster with my soulmate, Slambo, and we will see you guys back tomorrow night for OWL by the numbers. Take care.